Hey folks, welcome to the God 8.0 video as the plot continues to thicken. I didn't make it that way, I just found it that way and I'm reporting on what I found, as with all things. The bulk of this video is going to consist of an interview that I did with Robyn, who is the host of Courage is the Cure. Great show. She's a great lady as well out there in Australia. And we had a really good chat this week about what's been going into this series of so-called God videos, actually. So just for a change, I didn't talk about the shenanigans and the machinations of the controlled corporate music industry, but we got into matters of spirituality and theology. And I was pretty happy with how that chat turned out. And I think some good points were made by Robyn as well as myself. And so I'm going to include the relevant parts of that interview as the main core of this video. So once the intro parts are over, you'll be able to listen to the remainder of that. Going to be getting into some feedback shortly. This is correspondence, as ever, that I've received in response to the previous installments in this series. But to kick off with, I just want to consider for a while the matter of spelling, the spelling of words, and specifically the English language, because this is the one where all the word magic literally happens. So I've addressed this in a couple of previous videos and interviews that I've done. It will be no accident and it will not be down to random chance that the English language was exported around the world as part of the domination of the British Empire. This would have been by design because when we speak in English, it is literally casting spells, which is where we get the word spelling from, given that everything in this realm of creation is energy, frequency, and vibration. So even though I'm very open to the idea of this being some sort of virtual reality AI type computer simulation, that still doesn't negate the prominent role that frequency, energy, and vibration makes. So it can be computer coding, if you want to use that analogy, but still, when you break it all down, it's energy, frequency, and vibration. And of course, that is present in words, is present in the audible signature of words, and also in the intent and the will behind those words. And specifically, the will of those who created those words in the first place. And given that English is a mismatched hodgepodge of different influences, some Latin, some German, some French, some Spanish, it's all over the place. It makes no sense. I don't envy anyone learning English as their second language because there's no logic or reason to it at all. And that again will be by design because it's there to have us literally speaking certain intentions into being through incantations and mantras and the different meanings that these words carry. So, to make the point, I've made a list of some words here which I feel speak to the idea of this place being some sort of prison, some sort of soul trap that we find ourselves in for whatever reason. I think we're being given clues as to the true nature of this existence through the language that many of us, the majority of people, I guess, on the surface of Earth, have been coerced into speaking and using every day without giving it a second thought. So, first off, the very idea of writing and spelling itself, we've got a lot of double meaning. We've got a lot of wordplay going on here. So, spelling, we spell words. And when it comes to witchcraft and sorcery, we are casting spells. So, we're literally spelling when we write words on the page or on the screen. Then there are many expressions which echo the idea of being kept in prison or serving out some sort of prison term. There's one right there. Term is a way of expressing yourself through language, but term is also present in prison. So the amount of time that you spend in prison being locked up is a term. Then we have sentence. So when we write, we group words together into sentences. And what's a sentence? It's the amount of time that you're decreed to have to spend in prison within that system. Pronounce. When we express words and we're said to pronounce them, that seems to have a double meaning in terms of how somebody is pronounced guilty in court. So they'll be pronounced uh, guilty of a certain crime. Then you have a statement. So within language, within words, when you again express something, you're said to be making a statement. But in court, within the so-called legal system, admiralty maritime law, you also have a statement which is given by the prosecuting judge, prosecuting lawyer, and also a statement at the end of the term, which is given by the judge. Then you have a passage as a group of words or sentences bunched together. And what could that be? Maybe a passage through life, a passage through these experiences, maybe an evocation of that. Cymatics is the science of sound and the effect that sound vibration has on items. So often you'll see sand sprinkled onto drums, and then the drums will have different frequencies applied to them, and the sand forms itself into different patterns according to the frequencies. So that science is known as cymatics, but what if it's psi, as in taking a deep sigh, as I do most days? What if that is present in that word for a reason? Because we're imprisoned by the language that we speak. Phonetics also applies to the science of sound, and that is directly derived from the Phoenicians, that civilization, that community, that group who were responsible for instilling their culture in various parts of the world as they went around conquering nations. Writing, how about when we write? That could be seen as writing, putting right, putting correct, something which is wrong, righting wrongs, double meaning there. And then the last one I've noted down is cursive writing. How about that? Kids are taught in school to join up their letters as they write into cursive writing. Are they passing a curse as they do so? The next group of words that I've noted down here apply to the idea of religion and church systems, mainly within the Christian church. It's not that I'm picking on Christians, never do. It's just that this makes the point so well in terms of that entire system being there to spiritually imprison us in this place rather than setting us free and putting us on a course towards higher consciousness. And again, I believe it's all there in the words. So, first off, the very word religion itself can be traced back etymologically to the Latin verb religare, which means to hold or bind back, to thwart from forward progress. Is that not a suitable analogy for what the organized religion systems of the world are really there for? They're not to set us on a path towards higher consciousness and set us free from this place. They're to keep us locked down and held back within it. It's right there in the word. Thinking about Christian communities, we hear about church parishes. Well, the word parish is only one letter away from perish. So is that an indication of what these mind control systems are really there for? Because that's how I see them. I will have horrified many more with that statement. The word church is derived from a Scottish word, kirk. That's why you find many towns still, like Falkirk and many others, which still bear that within their name. So the word kirk is actually derived from a demon, the name of a demon within Egyptian mythology. So again, another clue. It's not as if we're not being told here. So this particular demon captured humans, turned them into pigs, and ate them, according to the myth. Then think about the word pray. So we're entrained to think of that as a direct hotline to God, where we can speak to him or it and express our desires and our wishes. Well, pray is identical phonetically to the word pray with an E. And when we think of the animal kingdom, prey are animals which are hunted down and brutally killed by other animals, predators, as food. So, is it an accident that we have the word prey being so similar to that other meaning of it? And as has been mentioned in other videos in this series, does praying really work? When you think about all the prayers that would have been offered up all around the world over the past 4 years specifically, even by people that have bought the official narrative of what we've been told about what we've all been through, they would have been praying to their God for deliverance from all this horrific stuff and all this chaos and this evil. And how many people get prayed for in church congregations who are ill? And there's quite a few ill people at the moment. Can't think what might have been causing that. And they get prayed for. All these wishes get offered up to God for them to make a hasty recovery. And what happens? Many of them just end up dying. So, where did all those prayers go? And what was the value of them? I'll get into this some more in that chat with Robyn in our podcast, which will be at the end of this. The pulpit. What about breaking down that word? The place where the priest delivers the sermon. So, pulpit. Are you being pulled towards a pit? Is religion actually a soul trap? Part of this whole soul trap system? Are the clues right there in the words? Bible. Are you buying bull from the Bible? And a passage. Again, a passage within biblical text or the text of other holy books. Is it a passage towards something other than what you think? A passage towards what, we might ask. The world of work. This is a great one because we've got so many double meanings here. When we think about our jobs that many of us, most of us, have to get up in the morning, there's our first clue, and go out and do just to survive and pay our way through this world and support our families and such, there are many interesting terms there. A greeting that you often get when you first meet somebody, when you perhaps arrive at the workplace, will be hello. Break that word down and you get hell. Oh. Or if you reverse it, oh hell, as in this place, it would seem. A better option might be to say hi, because the double meaning there is that you're high, not on drugs necessarily, though you might be, but spiritually high, in a high place of consciousness. Or all right. Often people will say, all right. And if you think about that, you're saying that everything is over to the right, as in the right hemisphere of the brain, as in where intuition and higher states of consciousness reside, as opposed to the left hemisphere of the brain, which is all about logic, reason, rationality, and all that stuff. So we also have, as I just mentioned, morning is the first thing that many people will say when they see others. Morning, good morning. Think about the word mourning when it comes to a funeral procession. What are the people doing there? Mourning the passage or the passing of whoever it is that's died. We're often said to earn a living or go out and earn money. An urn is the vessel in which ashes of a deceased cremated individual are kept. That's worth bearing in mind. Our job, our career, is often described as an undertaking. We go out and undertake these jobs. Well, an undertaker is somebody who presides over a funeral and somebody who takes care of a deceased body. Week, the working week. Well, phonetically, that's identical to weak with an A, as in the opposite of strong, as in being kept in a weak state. And then you get to the end of the working week and you arrive at, what do we call it? The weekend. Or, if you express it slightly differently, weakened. You've been weakened by your week's undertaking, and now you're at the end. Also, our job, spelt J-O-B, is identical to the name of the biblical character who was effectively tortured and traumatized by the psychopathic so-called God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, who it would seem is interchangeable with the idea of the demiurge that we've been discussing in this series, or Rex Mundi, Yaldabaoth, Satan, whatever other name you want to put on it. So not the original God of creation, but the entity, the demonic entity, which presides over this realm, this hell world. Hello. So Job, are we being told that when we go out and do these jobs, we're suffering in the same way that the character of Job did? We're not free because we're forced to undergo these circumstances in our jobs. Then there's the word career to describe the job that we do for many, many years or decades, the nature of it. John Lennon addressed this in the lyrics to his song Working Class Hero, when he sang, "When they've tortured and scared you for 20 odd years, then they expect you to pick a career. When you can't really function, you're so full of fear." He'd figured out what it was all about by the point he knew that song, knew a thing or two. Money. How about money connected to work? Why do we go out to work? To earn these funds, right? And in Britain, in England, we earn pounds. What about pounds as in weight? Because they don't just describe money, they describe weight. Are we being told that we're getting weighed down, weighted down by money, weighted down in terms of our very souls into this base consciousness existence? Talking of England and the English language, the word England was originally derived from Engelland, from the German word Engel, meaning angel. So it's the land of angels, not that it feels like it, but it depends what kind of angels we're talking about. If we are talking about fallen angels, or one particular fallen angel which may preside over this realm, it makes so much more sense, doesn't it? And then finally, I've got a group of words related to the human body. So we find ourselves in these flesh prisons. We find ourselves reduced into this very dense consciousness inside these bodies. And we can often feel very trapped within them. And I guess that's the idea. That was the idea of the architect of this place, this realm, this state of existence, to get us pushed into these physical vessels that we can't escape from until that moment of death or passing to whatever lies beyond. So, how about the mind? Our consciousness is said to reside within our minds. And to mind something is to be careful because there's a peril, there's potential danger ahead. So you're told to mind out. Then souls. We are said to be spirit souls. We're said to be divine sparks. Before we got condensed down into these physical bodies, we existed in soul form. Well, if you think about the human body, where do you find a soul? You find it on the bottom of your foot, right? it's not by accident that we have soles to our feet, because it's implying that we're being kept in base consciousness, pressed down to the ground of this realm through our feet, through the very bottom of our bodies. Why else would the bottoms of our feet be described as soles, phonetically identical to the idea of our spirit souls? Then a couple of examples referring to alcohol. So I'm certainly not condemning alcohol, because I know a lot of people find solace in it. And full disclosure, I do myself. I enjoy a beer or two or three of an evening. It helps me to get through. Again, in the lyrics of John Lennon, whatever gets you through the night, it's all right. So a lot of people find solace in alcohol, but the word seems to have been derived from an Arabic word, al-kul, and it's from that that we get the idea of spirits, as in whiskey and gin and vodka. These types of drinks are described as spirits, right? Will that be by accident? And then specifically, you've got the drink gin, which is phonetically identical to the jinn with a D, which is the Islamic world's idea of a demon. It's their version of a Christian demon, or the archons in the Gnostic tradition. So isn't it interesting that we've got all these double meanings with words? And yeah, pretty bad news when it comes to alcohol. But again, if that's what people need to get through in these challenging lives, then who am I to knock it, especially when I enjoy a tipple myself? So I want to move on now to the feedback section. So I have received a whole bunch of correspondence, as is always the case with these videos, in the form of direct emails that have been sent and in the form of comments that have been left below the various video channels. So this first one comes from Dom of Sheep Farm Studios. Many people watching this will be familiar with the great output of Dom and Chris at sheepfarm.co.uk, good friends of mine. And Dom has given his blessing for this to be read out, so he sent me this message in response to a previous video. He says, "More ideas, I'm afraid. Our mother worked all her life and then died suddenly in 2009, just after retirement, aged 64. My dad was a tyrant and lived until 82, having fallen out with everyone. So on a micro level, that's it in a nutshell. Nice person dies young, and a not so nice person goes on living to a ripe old age. Me and Chris have a thing we discuss in private called the Waterson curse. It's not a sympathy party, it's just that we seem to have what we call attachment attacks from people who previously were either friends or colleagues. It sounds bonkers. It's like sentinels have been placed to derail our lives in small and large ways. It's very interesting to observe. It also happened to our wives before they met us. So Dom asks, is karma, therefore, another trick made up by the controlling parasites to make us believe that there is some kind of fairness or some kind of balance to life? The few of us who are awake and the NPCs are put through a life of constant trauma from so many directions that it has to be an organized objective. So karma could be an inverted process. This is an idea which I've raised before, with us as the obvious victims, and could possibly be a payment from the controllers to the psychos for putting us through the ringer, and used for their entertainment to watch, similar to the Hunger Games. So yeah, what if karma is an inverted dynamic? What if this place is set up to cultivate fear, pain, suffering, trauma? The code is written so that those who live within those states or bring them about in other people reap appropriate karma, in terms of they get on just fine. They operate really well in this reality because their behaviors are in keeping with the coding that's been written. And that would go some way towards explaining why so many good people, basically decent people who are trying to do the right thing in these times, trying to be of service to others, trying to be of help in the world, only seem to reap a whole load of suffering and shit as a result of their good, noble intentions. Because this place is not set up to reward good, noble intentions, because the entity that created it is not good, noble, or benevolent in any way. Not to say there's not an original creator who might embody all those qualities. And again, this is something I get into in my discussion with Robyn, as you'll hear as the video progresses. But that's that idea. And in response to that, there was another email from somebody else who said, interesting idea that karma might be a trick. In the 1960s, the popularization of so-called Eastern mysticism, which could well have been a psyop, sold the idea of karma to the mainstream masses. That's something that's always niggled me. So the idea of karmic payback and consequentialism wasn't really embraced in Western civilizations or cultures until the 1960s. And the popularization of Eastern mysticism and these ideas from Buddhism and Hinduism and other religions were put into the public mindset during that decade. So if karma is a trick, then maybe karma is another form of belief trickery, same as folk are sold with Christianity, whereby if Christian believers punish themselves every time they supposedly sin, even if it's something quite harmless and innocuous, such as getting drunk or having a sexual thought or feeling, they must beg for forgiveness so that they're saved from eternal damnation. I call it beating yourself with a whip on your back every time you have a bit of fun. Have you noticed how having a bit of fun from time to time, if you're fortunate enough to be able to undergo that, can often feel like a bit of a sin? Because you look at all the problems in the world and all the people that are suffering. And if you do manage to grab a moment for yourself to do something that's just entirely personal, satiation, something you enjoy that's just for you, you can feel a bit guilty for it. We've been conditioned in that way. Well, some of us have anyway. The sin of fun. Life should contain some joy. That's supposed to be part of the experience. It's not supposed to be all suffering. And yet that's the way it's turned out for so many of us in these times. As every religion has the same narrative, such as a virgin mother and all the rest of it, and every religion has the same symbols, but presented in a slightly different way, maybe karma is the belief for the non-believers, as it were. So there'll be many people who reject the doctrines of the traditional organized religions, but they'll still maintain that they're spiritual. They have a spiritual belief. And these people are very likely to gravitate towards the idea of karmic payback, that you reap appropriate consequences for your thoughts, actions, and behaviors. But is that actually the case? If you're a good person who tries to do the right thing, do you reap appropriate results? If you're a selfish, psychopathic piece of shit who treads all over other people in pursuit of your own goals, do you reap appropriate punishment for that type of behavior? It would seem not, from all the examples we have before us. So is the idea of karma, in terms of how it's been fed to us, really valid? So there'll be many people who reject the doctrines of organized religions, but they'll still maintain that they've got a spiritual component, that they're spiritual beings. And I feel many of these people are likely to gravitate towards the idea of karmic payback being real. So if you're a decent person who tries to do the right thing and help others, the idea is that you attract towards yourself good, positive, karmic credit. On the other hand, if you're a selfish, psychopathic piece of shit who treads all over other people in pursuit of what you yourself want in a very satanic, selfish way, you're going to attract appropriate punishment for those choices. But does it really work that way? We don't see the evidence of it, do we? But we do see evidence of the opposite. Look at any given politician who was pushing the convid nonsense and all the associated harm that's come in its wake. Have any of them been seen publicly to have answered appropriately for what they've done, for their crimes against humanity, for their genocide? The answer is no, by the way. So somebody else writes, spiritual growth? How can suffering make anyone spiritually grow? If anything, it damages and retards any spiritual growth. Then the memory is wiped after death, so zero comprehension of any so-called mistakes which were made previously. Sounds like zero growth to me. No loving God would even allow one being to suffer. Yet every single being and every single animal and insect and bird and everything else suffers and feeds on other living beings. And that's love, right? From a loving God. Pretty much sums up the general theme of this series. Another individual writes, the answer is simple. Good people is a built-in glitch, a useful one, since their suffering warns those who might be thinking about becoming good never to do this, because everybody wants earthly happiness. So it works both ways. Bad people will never become good for fear of the consequences, and good people will eventually sell their souls to avoid suffering, especially the suffering of their children. I've seen many good-natured people turn bad after experiencing other people and their life events. The sad example of good people is a safety feature perpetuating the system. It might sound bizarre, but from my experience, all the people I knew that died of the arm spear were incredibly kind people, angels on earth who helped other people and the creation. But real scumbags, I know, got dozens of shots with boosters and they feel even better than before the Britneys. Not for nothing that Pfizer calls them software. Shitty software fits the shitty people perfectly, and it even helps them. And good people are incompatible with this software. That's the point I was making earlier. It is another evidence that we live in a real AI simulation with software and hardware and stuff. Well, it could well be. Somebody else writes, I can see your point, but if God doesn't allow people to do what they want, then that is the end of free will. In that case, we're literally robots following our programming without the ability to choose our actions. This could be a prison planet that we either chose to enter or were sentenced, there's that word again, to come through our own crimes in previous lives. The memory wipe is to stop us cheating, acting good just to get out, in the same way that psychopaths in regular prisons pretend to be rehabilitated just to get early release. The idea being that if you're truly a good person, you won't commit crimes against others. I'm not saying that this is necessarily true, but to me, it's a viable theory. The alternative that you suggest is that we're basically loose energy for demonic beings. There is no God and there's no escape. Well, yeah, I would maintain that we do live on a loosh farm, and all of that goes towards demonic beings, but I don't necessarily maintain that there's no escape. That would be a hideously negative and nihilistic viewpoint. More of that again in the podcast chat that follows. Another piece of correspondence. Greetings, Mark. It is crucial to start with an irrefutable premise. There is the uncreated and the created. Concomitant with this, everything that has a beginning has an ending. Logically, anything created has a beginning, so whether it's sentient life or inanimate matter, it will end, whether it takes 1 year or billions of years as we measure time. To escape the trap of endless recycling, reincarnation, and the ultimate disintegration of our consciousness when the demiurge reabsorbs everything it created, known as pralaya, which generally follows a kalpa, which is 4.32 billion years. That figure is interesting to me because it ties in with 432 hertz being the harmonic frequency, and it's also twice 216. 216 is an interesting number expressed in date form. It's the summer solstice, 21st of June, and so many other things. But anyway, we must focus on the uncreated where we originally came from. The uncreated, unknowable, unnameable God has no beginning and no end. Meditate on that for a moment for a mind fuck. That being does not create, it emanates. And that is where our divine spark or eternal spirit comes from. The demiurge, its archons, and the traitor Siddha gods, who are from the uncreated realm, who created this material hell, as powerful as they are, cannot touch this within us. But what they've done is to obfuscate it via intensely applied confusion and distractions to make most people forget or be unaware of their divine spark. Under these conditions, it's impossible to return home. Our mission is to focus on our eternal divine spark or spirit and battle our way back to the source of origin, the uncreated realm of unmanifested, unsplit light, our true home. We must maintain ourselves as an island of consciousness in a sea of awareness, thus reclaiming our inherent godhood. Immortality is not a given. It must be fought for through deceptions and obstacles and earned by intrepidness, audacity, valour, and an immutable iron will. This is a sacred, non discretionary obligation that one shirks at their own peril. It transcends everything in importance. So, thanks for that great comment. And I hope to get into more of these subjects in two conversations I'll be having in the coming weeks. One with Tony Sayers, who I know gets into many of these matters on his channel, and also my new conversation with Wayne Bush and also Julie McVeigh. So Wayne has agreed to come back on the show 10 years after we did that Good Vibrations episode in 2014 with his working partner, Julie McVeigh. So I'll be doing a show with them very soon as well. Somebody else writes, bingo. As real mystics and Gnostics have always said, just as groove is in the heart, so is the real God is in the heart. The Zoroastrians also talked about two gods, one of beauty and wisdom, the other of decay and slavery. They're both real. In Judeo-Christian circles, this was listed as God and the devil, but to me, the God of the Bible was actually the other God, aka the evil God known as the devil. I'd certainly agree with that when it comes to the Old Testament, at least. The thing is, this evil God will kill, enslave, and most importantly, use technology and weaponry to enslave. So we have to break the matrix by aggression, but not weaponry. Martial arts and intelligence shows how, writes this person. Somebody else, thanks so much for your thoughts, Mark. In regards to my thoughts, I don't understand why whatever created this world made some amazing stuff like mountains, valleys, rivers, oceans, waterfalls, the movement of the sun and the moon, as you've said, love, compassion, and all the rest of it, and also created the ball earth religion, carnism, psychopathy, deception, narcissism, pain and suffering, unfairness, etc. as well. I mean, what's the point of creating all these amazing things if I can't experience them to the fullest because I'm constantly suffering with one thing or another? And people say evil needs to exist for us to experience good, which is incorrect. Neutrality exists. We can be neutral and experience a rush of pleasure, for example. Unfairness is not needed for fairness to exist because of neutrality. As a side thought, why couldn't God fade light to the entire world at the same time and then fade it away at a later point? Why create this complex movement with these intangible bodies in the heavens that only light a specific part of the world as they go? Why fill the world with mostly unfairness and sprinkle in fairness here and there just so that the majority of human beings don't immediately presume this world is hell and try to find ways to kill themselves to get out of it? And then the soul trap possibility shows up, which rattles your core with fear. The worst possibility after death, out of all, is the soul trap. I do not want to come back to this hellish earth plane. No thanks. So many thoughts, so many questions, but no answers. Whatever created this world does not want to communicate with the most intelligent species on the earth plane. Why? Why did it forget about us? Did it throw away this dimension because it created too much evil but didn't delete it? Like how I threw away my toys in the attic without deleting them? Also, if demonic entities produce loosh for their food, what's the deal here? Why? They can't feel hunger unless they're in a physical body. So what's going on here? Are they obligated to do so by the infinite being? What do they gain by making creatures constantly suffer? In the end, no matter what I do and what I think, I have to suffer anyway. And since going away from this world peacefully is considered either a crime or a mental illness, so as to keep the slavery going for the governments, my family isn't keen on letting me go. I'm completely trapped, suffering with many health issues. This should be obvious, but without the infinite creator's knowledge, nothing can be created. If a God outside of the infinite creator's grasps popped up, excuse me, let me read that again. If a God outside of the infinite creator's grasp popped up like what Gnostics claim, what created that God? Nothingness? No, because nothingness doesn't exist. Another God, then? Yeah. So what created that God? Infinite regress. But please let me know if I'm wrong in any of these thoughts. And this is the last comment I'm going to read out now. As you can see, it's a very mixed bag, a bit of a hodgepodge of different ideas, but it's all food for thought, which beats loosh for thought, right? So here's the last one. Have you heard that they train artificial intelligence programs using algorithms? You know, they train these programs with lots of pictures, questions, texts, and problem solving nonsense. What if the real reason behind the suffering here is similar to this? Consider the root cause of this particularly imperfectly designed false illusion. What is most created in this reality is human suffering and the artificial problems that cause these problems. This is what this false reality produces the most. Why? It can be added that the main reason why these problems arise is that this material illusion is not designed perfectly, but deliberately imperfectly. In addition, there are fake crises and problems that the vast majority think are real, but are actually theatre, purposely designed to create pain and problems. Examples being fake wars, fake economic crises, fake political scandals, fake social events, and all the problems that arise as a result. Just as it's not a coincidence that this reality itself was designed imperfectly, at the same time, everyone knows that fake charlatans and their frauds, small hats, masons, etc., it's obvious they're not producing these fake theatres for more money. What if the only reason for the problems and the pain in this reality is something like the training of artificial intelligence programs that you've been hearing about a lot lately? What if that's why people are put through such an intense pain program without being noticed as much as possible? What if the people here are being used to train artificial intelligence? Or what if the artificial intelligence and pain program here are used to train the consciousness in a similar way? So that pretty much sums up the correspondence that I've received in response to the last videos. At this point, just a few housekeeping announcements before I progress into the podcast that I've mentioned. And this podcast with Robyn from Courage is the Cure is also going to be posted on my video channels in its entirety, so you'll be able to watch it separately. But because most of what I talked about in it ties into the themes in these God videos, I've included it here as well. So, really quickly through the announcements, I do want to remind people that I've got the MD archives, which I'm referring to it as. And this is an example of the disk drive that it fits onto, an external 1 terabyte disk drive consisting of the past 15 years worth of material that I've put out. Hundreds and hundreds of video and audio interviews, videos just like this, my audio books, my conscious music shows, my entire body of work from the past decade and a half. If you're interested in that, drop me an email to markdevlin2022@protonmail.com and I can send you all the details and all the arrangements of how you can get hold of all that work on a convenient external disk drive like that. I'm doing a summer t-shirt sale on t-shirts just like this. This is one of 4 slogans that I've got, and I'm basically running down my stock of these t-shirts because I want to invest in a couple of new slogans and get those out there on the streets. So I've got a huge stash of these t-shirts, and they're all available in black with gold yellow lettering, or in white with blue lettering like this, in 4 sizes. So small, medium, large, extra large. And the 4 slogans will be detailed in the show notes below. If you're interested in getting hold of any of these t-shirts, I'm doing a great deal where you can get any 5 for £30 plus the P&P, or any 3 for £20. More details below. Drop me an email if you're interested. If you're also interested in supporting my Patreon channel and getting 3 exclusive videos per month, which I won't post to any of my other channels. This is also a great way of supporting the continuation of my work if you've found value in it. So if you want to join my Patreon and get access to all of that, the link to it is below. Events, plenty of those upcoming in the forthcoming weeks. They're all detailed on my main website on the events page. Again, the link to that is below. I've just added an event in Glasgow, Scotland for Friday, 26th of July. That is going to be at Avant Garde in King Street, Glasgow, for all Scottish crew. If you're able to get along to that, it's going to be a presentation followed by an opportunity to socially mingle with like-minded people. Upcoming shows, as I say, with Tony Sayers and also Wayne Bush and Julie McVeigh guesting. I've been a guest on a couple of other people's shows as well, so watch out for those interviews forthcoming. The Sound of Freedom is my conscious music podcast, and I'm just about to drop a new installment of that. I would urge everybody to go and take a listen to it because it's a showcase of empowering message music by real, genuine artists who've got something to say and are unimpeded by any record company politics or bullshit because they're entirely independent and sovereign in the way they go about things. So, love this music. It's hugely inspirational. Watch out for the new installment of The Sound of Freedom really soon. So, all that being said, God 9.0 will follow in due course, no doubt, because this is not going to go away anytime soon. And in the meantime, here is the bulk of that show that I recorded with Robyn for Courage is the Cure earlier this week, in which I get into many of the other matters that have been discussed in these videos. Hope you enjoy this. Thanks as ever for the support. See you all again soon. Cheers.
Everybody, Robyn here from Courage is the Cure. Looking forward to this one. So let's get on with the show, shall we? Righty, greetings everybody. Robyn here from Courage is the Cure. It's episode 65 of Relentless, and I'm already giggling to myself because my wonderful guest here today, Mr. Mark Devlin, I started speaking to Mark without pressing record, but Mark is a DJ, a speaker, an author, and has spent the past 15 years researching the nefarious dark nature of the music industry and talking about things like social engineering and mind control and all of those wonderful things. So let me add Mark to the stage for the second time, and I've pressed record, Mark, so we're doing well. How are you?
Yeah, what's up, Robyn? My excuse is it's the morning for me, so I don't know what yours is. But that's a great intro to the show.
Cheers, Mark. Cheers.
And I've got this phrase that I use, which is, I'll stop when they stop, which is in keeping with your ethos there.
Yes. And I have a new tagline, Stay Relentless. And I mentioned to you before that I was looking at some photos, and one of our wonderful freedom fighters in Western Australia was snapped in a picture by the Healthy Leopard photographer, and she had a sign that said, "This ends when we say no." So, you know,
right.
It's a great photo and great sentiment on that, that's for sure. But yeah, no, my excuse isn't because it's morning. I think it's beer o'clock here in Australia, so you know, probably needing a beer. That might be what it is.
Okay, well, I'll be on that in a few hours myself. So.
So we spoke last year in September, and that was episode 26 of Relentless. You can go along to Rumble, Courage is the Cure, and check that out, episode 26. And we did talk in that interview about your research into the music industry. And then shortly after that, you made a trip to Australia to do a speaking tour. Do you want to let everybody know how that went when you came over to Australia?
Yeah, I had a great time. I'm someone who's always enjoyed traveling. And so when early 2020 hit, it really did look as if my traveling days were over. And I thought, well, this is it now. I'm never going to leave British shores again. I'm sure many people around the world felt that way. And all the indications were there that we were not going to be able to go to other countries without taking the old Britney Spears and, undergoing other measures. And there was no way I was ever going to do that. So I was resigning myself to the idea that, well, I'm stuck on British shores for the rest of my days now. Great. But then things showed signs of starting to open up in 2022 after a couple of really tough years. And Australia opened its borders to us filthy, diseased foreigners before America did and before a few other nations. And so I saw a pocket of opportunity in early 2023 to get myself over there again. So I'd made 6 trips to Australia up to that point on DJing tours. So in my previous life as a DJ, I was fortunate enough to travel to Australia between 2003 and 2009. But it had been 14 years since I was last there. And I love Australia. I mean, I would love to come and live there one day. Whether that happens or not remains to be seen. But I just saw this opportunity to get my ass out there. And I thought, well, I better do it soon. Better do it in 2023 because none of us know what's around the corner. So I put together a speaking tour with the assistance of associates of mine in 4 different cities. So it was Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and Perth. And I sort of zigzagged around between these different cities. And it was really great. At each gig, I drew around 75, 80 people, thereabouts. And I presented all the information I've got on the true nature of the music industry, what it's used for. I had a special section in part 2 about Australian artists with specific reference to the likes of Nick Cave, Sia, AC/DC, Olivia Newton-John, Kylie Minogue, some of these other artists. And it went down really well. And I would really like to repeat that experience someday if I get the chance. I got a little bit of R&R time while I was there, hit a couple of beaches. So what's not to like? What actually happened in the wake of that is I decided that the Australian speaking tour had gone down so well that I would try and replicate it in America in April of this year. Big mistake. I made the error of assuming that all markets were the same in terms of how my information will be received. And I thought, well, Australians loved it, so Americans are going to love all this stuff as well. So I tried to put together a mini tour for North America, hitting 4 cities there: New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and New Haven, Connecticut. And unfortunately, that didn't work out at all. I had to cancel my New York gig due to lack of interest. Sold 5 tickets. 5 people turned up in Boston, and I had 23 in Philadelphia and 25 in New Haven. And the way I make sense of that is that Australians have had it particularly tough these past 4 years. I mean, you guys were hit with a nightmarish dystopian situation in 2020, and you really got put through the ringer. And I think because of that, a lot of Australians woke up, to use that phrase, and started paying attention to what's really going on in the world and who these so-called governments really answer to and what the bigger agendas are. And because of that, there was a hunger for my information because it's all connected. So what goes on in the music industry is intrinsically connected to the political world and the world of science and medicine and big business and the military and the mass media. All these things are ultimately connected. And I think a lot of Australians recognized that, and they wanted to gain as much information as they could. And so they came along to my talks, and I was very gratified about that. Got a lot of people asking me questions at the end. A lot of great discussions were had. Whereas with the American situation, I think there tends to be an assumption among many Americans that they already know stuff. They don't need some British guy coming over and lecturing to them. It's either that or it's just apathy. They can't be asked to get up and go out to an event. I spoke to a lot of Americans, and those cities are all very different. You know, Philly, New York, Boston, New Haven, they all have different cultures. And a lot of my American friends were saying, well, American people just want to stay home and watch YouTube and just watch lectures that way. They don't want to come out and take part in events. So I learned a lot about the cultural differences between different nations. But
Yeah.
all in all, my trip to Australia was great. I had a wonderful time, connected with a lot of great people. I think the information was very, very well received, and I'd love to do it again someday.
100%. Yeah, I attended your presentation while you were in Perth, and of course it was in Fremantle, and people still talk about that on my live shows, because your name comes up quite regularly, actually, especially for Cafe Locked Up viewers. You've got a lot of fans and supporters amongst that audience.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, people were thrilled to hear you speak in person, not only in Perth, people I've spoken to, but also people in the eastern states. Yeah, because I saw some little updates while you were traveling in the US, and you commented about you showing New York, and I was wondering to myself, well, what does that say about the people that are there? Is it that they want to stay home and watch lectures and shows on YouTube, or are they, do they really have the blinders down and they're just, it doesn't even enter their mind that finding out some information about the music industry might be helpful on their journey, about acquiring knowledge and all those sorts of things.
Well, New York has changed a lot culturally, New York City. I mean, I don't want to spend all the time talking about America on an Australian show, but I did spend a few days in New York City. And New York is another place that I've been going to for years, about 30 years. I must have made about 50 trips there. Used to love the place. I went out there to DJ. I went out there to buy records. I was just fascinated with the hip hop history of the place. And it was just amazing, went to all these old sites like Paradise Garage and Studio 54 and where these legendary nightclubs used to be. But it's changed. I went there in 2019 and I went there again this year. So there was a 5-year gap. And of course, all the COVID business happened during that time. And yes, it's changed. So an observation I had was that I was walking around the Times Square area and I barely saw another white person. So it was Asians, Chinese, Middle Eastern, whatever, just no white people. I mean, I'm just making the observation, just making the statement. Can't help but notice that there's no white people in New York. Not saying that's a good thing, not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that the cultural texture of that place has changed. And this will all be by design. This is all agendas, the Kalergi plan that people can look up, see what that's all about. Cultural displacement, and it's definitely happened there. And I think because in New York City now you've got so many people from all these different countries that have come in as immigrants, they don't have that knowledge base necessarily in place, and they maybe come from nations where there's not a culture where people have asked these big questions and looked into the true nature of who really runs the world. So the interest levels just aren't there. And again, my American friends were telling me that a lot of people that previously lived in New York have just moved away now because the place has become so woke, so communistic, so socially engineered that anyone who's vaguely awake and vaguely paying attention to stuff just doesn't want to be in that environment anymore. So a lot of New Yorkers have just moved away. And that's why there was no interest in my talk, which I didn't realize at the time. But I will not be making the mistake of attempting to do an event of that nature in New York City again, sadly.
I have to say I was flabbergasted. Haven't used that word for a long time. When your short form videos were coming up when you were traveling. Yeah, but there you go. I mean, things. I guess that demonstrates how quickly things can change, and particularly when you're talking about people that come from countries that don't have free speech and all those sorts of things, or you're certainly not encouraged in any way, shape or form.
A lot of Chinese people there. A lot of Chinese people. And as we know, Chinese people have not had access to the internet in many cases. So they're just not going to know stuff because they've been firewalled off.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a bit of a China watcher. It's quite astounding, the level of censorship over there. But hello Australia. We've got the digital ID bill rolling around Australia. So watch out. Same sort of social credit system they've got happening in China. We're not far off that here now. So
Well, you're the test bed, aren't you? They use
Mm.
Australia as the testing ground for these things and try and perfect the
Absolutely,
model before they roll it out elsewhere, sadly.
I do. And Australia's a lovely country, but they bank on the fact that we are an island. We don't have any borders. We can't escape anywhere. We just have to, lump it and carry on, because not enough people will say anything about it, do anything about it. That's one of the great advantages of Australia for these globalist reprobates. Oh,
Yeah.
nearly got my potty mouth out there, Mark.
Well, maybe I won't get out there someday. Maybe it won't happen. Who knows?
Yeah, you just said you wanted to come live here. I know a lot of people that are moving back to European countries because they can't stand the level of censorship and repression here.
I think I'm in pre-2020 Australia mode in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm remembering happy days in the early 2000s, but yes, it is different now, clearly.
Yeah. So one of the things, one of the main things that I wanted to talk to you about was a new series that you have started. And if I'm correct, the first upload of this series was in January this year, 2024. And you can find this on Mark's YouTube channel. And it's called Is God Really Good? And I just had a quick check before we started recording, Mark, and that video this is YouTube, right? Where community guidelines and standards equal censorship, right? That video, Is God Really Good? Has 10,000 views, which is a lot for YouTube, really. Over 400 comments. And so that initial video has led on to a series, as I said, and I think you're up to God 7.0 now, is it?
Yeah, I'm doing 8 this week.
Doing 8 this week. And you've talked to people like, I'm going to butcher his name, Howdy McCoskey. Is that how I pronounce his name?
Yeah, that's it.
And a couple of other very interesting people. Well, the first episode there, Is God Really Good? You talk about a few different things there, or you ask a few different questions which you discuss in the video, I guess you could really say. Can you tell us about those topics that you brought up in Is God Good, and why you think so many viewers not only watched it but commented on it and really sort of had a lot to say in their comments?
Yeah, it reminds me actually of when I first woke up to conspiracy stuff. So we're going back probably 17 years, something like that. When I first started reading the books of David Icke, and I first came to reassess my entire worldview. And I realized that the world is nothing like we thought it was. It's not run by the people we're told it is. There are other groups and networks controlling every aspect of human society. And that's a bitter pill to swallow when you first come across it. But, you deal with it. You go through that dark night of the soul and you press on. And then you start plowing through all the information. You start learning about Freemasonry and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group and all this stuff. You learn about all the names and all the places and the dates and all the detail and stuff like that. But then I think you go a level deeper if you're prepared to go where the truth takes you, and you start to get into spiritual, metaphysical, sort of otherworldly realms, and you start questioning spirituality. You start questioning, what is this place? What is our true nature? And for most of the past 15 years or so, I was under the belief system that we are spirit souls that come from source somewhere, expressions of God, you might say, individuated units of consciousness. And there's a sort of system or a culture which teaches us that we consent to come here into this 3D physical reality. So we're not forced, but in spirit soul form, in higher states of consciousness, we agree to come into this dense physical reality and to live the lives that we find ourselves in. And that chimed with me for a very long time. But towards the start of this year, it was starting to not make the sense that it once did. And this was based on personal experience and personal observations. So I was basically using the scientific model. Is something observable, testable, repeatable? That's how you find out if it's real. And I was looking at friends and associates of mine, and I only really associate with what you would call truthers these days. I don't hang out with normies because I wouldn't know how to have a normie conversation anymore. When I go down the pub and everyone's talking about football and stuff, I'm over in the corner minding my own business. So most of the people that I meet at conferences and festivals and things of that nature are of a similar sort of level of consciousness to me, you might say. And I noticed that every single one of them was suffering in some way, great hardship in their lives. Might be financial hardship, it might be relationship problems, it might be personal health problems, whatever it was. Every single one of these people who are basically decent people, they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to help others. They're trying to be of service to creation. They're trying to put others before themselves. They're trying to make this world a better place. They're thinking about what the future is going to be like for their children if they don't step up and do stuff. All of these people were reaping just suffering and hardship and crap in their lives. There was a direct correlation. And it's also the same in my own life. I'm not going to get into the details, but yeah, I've been through personal hell the past 4 or 5 years, pretty much since the start of COVID. And so in January, I started asking all these big questions in my own mind. And I really feel that all roads are going to lead to this point. If you are someone who seeks truth no matter what, and you're prepared to go wherever it takes you, eventually you're going to arrive at this point. And the questions are going to be, what exactly are we? Who are we? Where do we come from? What is this place all about? What created it? To what ends? And what happens when we leave here? So those are the questions I've been asking in my so-called God videos of this year. I mean, I've called it the God series because you got to call it something, right? But I had a great chat with Eric Dubay in, I think it was probably March. And there was an analogy that he put out in one of his short videos, which really resonated with me. And the analogy was a bunch of people find themselves out at sea on a boat. So they wake up one day and they find they're in a boat. They're sailing out at sea somewhere. None of them have any recollection of how they got there. None of them remember agreeing to get on the boat. None of them know how to steer the boat. None of them know where the boat is headed. None of them know who built the boat. And they've all got to try and figure it out for themselves. And everyone on the boat has an idea. Oh, it was built by this person, or we're going to this place, or the purpose of it is this. And then the next man will be like, no, that's wrong. No, it's this. And then the third man would be right, like, you're both wrong. No, it's this. And I thought that was a great analogy for the lives in which we find ourselves. And Eric made me realize that the only sensible way to approach these big questions is to admit to yourself that you just don't know. This is agnosticism, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not atheism. I'm not an atheist, because clearly something created this realm. Here we are. It's self-evident. So there is some kind of creative generative force, which people would call God. But in terms of what that God is, whether it's good, whether it's malevolent, what it wants for us, what this place is designed to be, where we go when we leave it, the truth is we just don't know. Everyone will claim they know, hence the 400 comments below the first video there. And most of those comments will be from offended Christians. Just saying, you know, I've realized that these God videos have pissed off a lot of Christians. And it was never my intention to do that. I used to identify as a Christian, a born again Christian in the
Mm-hmm.
90s, did that for 4 years, been through it, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, no longer makes sense to me. But for some reason, I wasn't pissing off Hindus. I wasn't pissing off Buddhists. I wasn't pissing off Jews. I wasn't even pissing off atheists. It was just Christians that were calling me a heathen. They were calling me a devil for even asking these questions. And they got triggered, like I say in my videos, more triggers than a Smith and Wesson factory.
So what is it? Because you just said you were a Christian for 4 years. What is it that moved you from your thoughts that, because you've used the word God many times already as we've spoken. What was it that's moved you from, the Christian God to, God being a nature or a force or something like that?
So I became a Christian in 1990. And this was at a point in my life where I was starting to feel different about things. So I was quite young, and I was reassessing my perception of the world even back then. And at the time, I had an auntie who was a devout Christian. And when I mentioned this to her, she said, "Oh, it's a calling from the Lord. You need to come into the church." So she sort of coerced me into attending this evangelical Christian church. And I did that for 4 years because I wasn't finding the answers anywhere else. There was no internet back in those days. So I wasn't able to research other faiths, other belief systems. And I lived in England, which is a predominantly Christian country, at least in name. And so I just got strong-armed into that for 4 years. But at the end of that process, I left feeling very bitter and very deceived because of the behaviors of people that I'd seen within the church. The way that they conducted themselves in their lives didn't seem to be consistent with the teachings and what they were supposed to be espousing. So that made me into an atheist. And I thought, well, it's all BS, that there's no God really. And I gravitated towards the work of Richard Dawkins. Can't believe it now, but at the time, his stuff made sense to me. And I just went through a process. And over the next 15 years or so, I came back around to spirituality. And I came to realize that, of course, there's a God, whatever it may be. And of course, we're spirit souls. We're not humans having a spiritual experience. We're spirits having a human experience. And so for the next 15, 17 years, all of that made sense to me. And it wasn't until the start of this year that I started to reassess things. And so I've been looking at the teachings of the Gnostics and to a certain extent the Cathars and some of the things that they believed in. And in a nutshell, the Gnostics were of the view that this realm is the creation of a lesser kind of God. So it's not the original God of creation. It's not the generative force that was behind all things, but it's what you might refer to as a fallen angel. And I think this idea expresses itself in many belief systems. So some will say this is Lucifer. Christians will say, well, Lucifer is the fallen angel, and they equate Lucifer with Satan. Satan is another name that you get for this entity or this force. The Gnostics referred to it as the demiurge. Another name that is given is Yaldabaoth, and it's also known as Rex Mundi by the Cathars. And the idea is that it's some kind of entity which was able to create this realm for itself. It was jealous and envious of the original God of creation, and it was very arrogant and egotistical in spirit form somehow, and decided to create this place. And so we find ourselves in it because presumably we've been tricked or forced or coerced into being here. Because I personally don't accept that anyone would have agreed to come down into this dense 3D reality and live in this hell world, which is what I believe it to be. So It is a pretty morbid outlook, and I do try and find some positives in it. And as the conversation goes on, hopefully we can gravitate towards some of the positives. But
Mm.
I see this place as a hell world. The reason there's pain, suffering, and hardship everywhere is because it was designed to be that way. This place
Well,
was created to cultivate all of that.
your boat, well, not your boat analogy. Who was the person that you heard give that boat analogy?
Eric Dubé.
Eric. What a great analogy. I mean, all of those things, you know, you just wake up on the boat, don't know who built it, don't know why you're there, nobody knows how to operate it, everybody's got their own thoughts. Two things come to mind there, top of mind, Jean-Pierre. Sorry, it's a joke. Two things come to mind there is why don't people ask themselves those questions? It seems to me that a lot of people don't even realize that there's those questions to ask themselves in the first place. And even just to realize that you know, we're here, we've got no idea how we got here, why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, how many times do you hear parents with a brand new baby say, oh, I don't know, they don't come with a manual? You know, that's what we always say. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about that boat analogy. And then you're speaking there just about being tricked and forced to come here, as opposed to us choosing or agreeing to come here. I have to agree with you. Who would agree to come here when you know, and certainly a lot of Buddhists would say that, you know, our life, there's one thing for sure, it's just full of suffering. You know, why would we choose to come here to suffer daily and have no idea as to why we're here anyway, or what we're supposed to be doing and all those sorts of things?
Right.
So yeah, that boat analogy certainly sparks a lot of questions. Why do you think people don't ask themselves that, or don't even realize that there's those questions to ask themselves?
I wonder that all the time. I can't believe that people go through an entire human lifetime without asking these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of normies. I go and visit my parents, and both their neighbors have lost their husbands, so they're women in their 80s, and they just potter around, you know, do the shopping, put the washing out. And I look at them and I think, I bet you've never in your life considered what it's all about, have you? You just go through the motions. And I say that because I've known these women all my life, because they were there when I was growing up as a kid. So I've got some insight into what they're like. And they just strike me as people that go about their business and never question what they're here for. And I think that's most people. And it amazes me. There are all kinds of answers that are given. So we get told that our spirit souls consent to come here in order to learn lessons, to grow and evolve. I've heard this one consistently over the past several years, and it used to make some sense to me. But now I see it as a new age deception. I see all organized religions as control systems, methods of mind control. That triggers anyone of a religious persuasion the minute they hear it. It's not my intention to trigger anyone. It's not my intention to offend anyone. It's not my intention to attack anyone's belief system. But it's clear to see that organized religion, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Judaism, whether it's Islam, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's any of these Eastern mysticism systems, are methods of mind control, because they all come with their books, their holy books, their instruction manuals, rules and regulations. You must do this. You can't do that. You've got to live your life this way. You've got to look up to this religious figure. You've got to praise this deity. And they're all just instructions. And then you've got the new age version of that, which is, oh, you're just here to learn and to grow. And if you go through hardship and suffering, you've got to embrace it because it's going to enrich your soul. This really makes no sense when you factor reincarnation into the deal. So most Eastern religions adhere towards the idea of reincarnation. We go through endless lives and we have to try and perfect ourselves life after life, get a little bit better, learn things like compassion and empathy towards others and patience and all these other life lessons. But what sense does any of that make if you have this memory wipe, which we
Mm.
clearly undergo from life to life, if we do go through these many lives? This is another thing about the boat analogy. You wake up in this boat one day, you've got no memory of how you got there, and
Mm.
that's a metaphor for life. So if we've lived before, and if we're supposed to get better with every successive lifetime, what's the bloody point of having your mind wiped each time so you can't remember what you learnt the previous incarnation? And new age types will say, oh, you carry it in your intuition, you know the difference between right and wrong. And I can get into that a bit more as we progress. And
Mhm.
they've got an answer for everything. But really, it makes no sense, because imagine you went to a science class at school, and in lesson one, they teach you this and that and all this detail and stuff. And then you turn up for lesson two, and you can't remember a bloody thing that you learned in lesson one.
Mhm.
So you have to learn it all over again. What's the point in having lesson two then, if you're
Mhm.
not going to remember lesson one? So
Mhm.
it really makes no sense. And if you're supposed to grow and evolve, then you're not going to achieve that if you have no guidebook, if you have no clear idea of what it is you're doing here. And that's one of the reasons why I feel that we're actually trapped here. It's one of the
Mm.
reasons why I feel that this is a place that was designed to cultivate fear and pain and suffering and trauma. And all these people that say, oh, we learn lessons from our lives and we have to go through these things, I guess they haven't spoken to too many survivors of satanic ritual abuse like I have.
Mm.
I guess
Mm.
they've not looked into trauma-based mind control and what
Mhm.
gets done to young children that just happen to be born into the wrong families. I
Yep.
guess they've not looked at the fine detail of how children are ritually abused.
Yep.
Because who's seriously going to look at a child like that and say, oh, they chose that? They
Yep.
chose that experience. They wanted it. There
Yep.
they were in a higher state of consciousness. They could have had any kind of life they wanted. Anything could have happened to them. And they said, oh, I would like to suffer at the hands of Satanist pedophiles, please. That's a lesson I want in my life. Sorry,
Yeah.
not buying it. That's making no
No,
sense to me whatsoever.
not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And I think if, I think that's one way to shut that argument down is by saying, are you really saying that people agree to be born into families like that, or a situation where they're, in those circles? No,
Yeah, I'm not having that.
absolutely not.
Makes no sense.
No. Mm-mm. So, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because you've just mentioned here about as opposed to making a choice or agreeing to be here, but that in fact we're trapped here. What would be the reason for us being trapped here? And you've touched on it slightly with the words fear and those sorts of things. Why is it that it would be that?
I feel that whatever entity or entities created this realm, they feed off of fear-based energy. So a
Mhm.
word you often hear these days is louche energy, meaning dense, negative derivations of fear. So anxiety, stress, worry, regret, trauma, pain, all those things. Do they sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Most people in our lives are experiencing some form of those emotional states. Well, probably all, actually. And if you go back over all of known recorded human history, all that you're ever going to find is pain, suffering, fear, uh, turmoil
Mm.
in some form or other. There have always been wars. There's always been strife between different groups in society. There's always been hunger and famine and all these other terrible things, natural disasters, even earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes. What's that all about? Why would a loving God create these things? Not only that, but think of the natural world, the food chain. Think of how many billions of living sentient beings kill each other every single day, often in really horrific ways, just to eat and survive and make it through another day. That is happening all around us every single day. Why would a loving, caring, benevolent God create a system where that is necessary when there were so many different ways in which it could have been? So
Mm-hmm.
all of this stuff stacks up for me as evidence that whatever created this realm is not loving, does not want the best for us, and actually feeds off of the fear, the pain, the suffering, the torment that is caused. And that ties into what happens in the so-called real world. That's why we have these elite types that come up with all these agendas and all these different ways to enslave us and create the stress and create the anxiety in our lives. And haven't they stepped all that up visibly in the last
Mm-hmm.
4 years? So I feel these people are like the agents, the representatives, if you like, of the spiritual entity that ultimately presides over this realm. Again, there is some good news, which I want to get to, because I realize that people listening to this could be getting quite down at this point. But, you know, it is what it is. And I'm someone that seeks truth. And this is
Yep.
where I've arrived in my personal journey. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm asking these questions. I think it's very important that we do while we've got the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing. I'm asking questions. And I don't get a lot of answers from
Yeah.
people. You know, I get religious types and new age types, and they'll just spout a load of their doctrine and say, oh, well, my teachings tell me this and my book tells me that. But they don't really answer these questions.
Well, I mean, yes, you know, some of the viewers could think, oh, this is a bit of a downer, blah, 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 blah. But sorry, I seem to remember a number of years ago there was a children's movie that came out called Monsters Inc.
There you go.
And what did the monsters capture and get their source of energy from? Wasn't it?
Loosh,
Yeah, and
the
that's a
fear of
children's
children.
movie. Yeah. So, you know, I think probably we might have talked about programming in our other interview, and I know people, you know, we have many conversations with other guests about that, with, you know, movies and so on and so forth, and blah blah blah. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough topic. Already mentioned that religious groups can get offended, but when they're putting things like that in children's movies and putting it in people's faces, people have to ask themselves.
Right.
You know, they have to ask
They're
themselves
telling
something.
you. They're telling you what goes on. And another thing that you hear talked about endlessly is the concept of karma. What
Mm-hmm.
goes around comes around, consequentialism, actions have reactions. And that used to make sense to me as well. And I used to genuinely believe that if you live a good life and you try and serve others and you try and do what you know to be the right thing, you will reap rewards appropriate to your actions. Whereas if you're a really bad person, you're selfish, you're narcissistic, psychopathic, you tread all over others, you want to enslave others, you want to do harm to others, that's going to come back at you and you're going to suffer. But if we're really, really honest and we look at the evidence around us, the
Mm-hmm.
opposite seems to be the case, doesn't it?
That's right. If
Good
you're a
people, good people who try and do the right thing end up reaping a whole load of shit in their world, whereas evil psychopathic shits, and there's no
mm,
shortage of those, we can name
mm,
names if we want,
mm,
Mr. A down there in Victoria,
mm,
and so many others, you know, um,
mm-hmm.
all these architects of the hell that we've all been put through these past 4 years. Where are they now? Are they in jail?
No.
Nope. Walking
Oh,
around free, very rich,
Mark,
laughing, big Cupid's delight,
I
smiles on their faces.
I've got to show you something. I just so happen to have it here because I've been talking about it. Two of those people that made our lives hell, one in Western Australia and one in Victoria, our premiers. Ours was in Western Australia, Mr. Mark McGowan, and in Victoria it was none other than Dan Andrews, or Dictator Dan. Were you aware that a couple of weeks ago, both of them, this is Mark McGowan, received the Companion of the Order of Australia from the King? So Mark McGowan and Dan Andrews got those awards just a couple of weeks ago. So
makes sense.
Great example.
Yeah. So now I'm coming to another really uncomfortable idea, that this dynamic of karma is not real. It's being created to placate us as part of the New Age system of teachings, so that we believe that bad people are going to get their comeuppance, if not in this world, then in what lies beyond. But there's actually no proof of that. And if we go by what we can observe through personal experience, all we ever see is these people thriving and surviving. In Britain this week, we had a general election, and we've now got Sir Keir Starmer, Sir, note the Sir, who's been ushered into office. So Sir Keir Starmer is very well remembered for being head of the Crown Prosecution Service, who had the case against Jimmy Savile and everything that he was getting up to brought before him. So Keir Starmer had the opportunity to prosecute Jimmy Savile while he was still alive, but he let him go due to insufficient evidence. Meanwhile, he gets made a Sir. So that's Sir Jimmy, Sir Keir. He's now our Prime Minister. And
I've just got a picture here too that I saved. That's a nice hand gesture there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a natural way to put your hands, isn't it? We all do that.
Of course it is.
Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned.
So we've got that going on. And so those who do great evil and great harm against others, and Starmer was calling for even stronger lockdowns in the UK. We had Boris Johnson, that was bad enough. But Starmer was in the background saying, no, you need to be even more harsh and, follow the Australian model and lock people down even more. So great. Yeah, he's in office now. What could possibly go wrong? So it doesn't seem to be the case that the better you are, the nicer things you reap in life. It seems to be the opposite. And another thing, I know I'm ranting now, but another thing is manifestation. This idea that you manifest your own reality. Well, actually, that doesn't seem to work either. Or if it does work, you seem to get the opposite of what you've asked for. I mean, I can go into some examples if you want. I had a coffee shop analogy in one of my God videos, which I used to make the point. Inspired by the Eric Dubé boat thing, I came up with this coffee shop analogy, which we can get into if you want.
Yeah. I remember you talking about in that show. I think the audience would like to hear that. Yeah.
All right, let me just let me try and call it up here, because I can read it out if you like.
And for everyone watching, I'll put Mark's links in the description of the video as well, so you can go along and visit Mark's website and his YouTube channel and a few other pages as well.
Sure. Okay, so I've got it here. So this is a metaphor for manifestation. And the scenario is somebody walks into a coffee shop. Okay, so here are the points. Number one, you go into a coffee shop and you ask for a coffee. The server refuses. You ask why. She says, it's because you didn't ask in the right way. You ask, how are you supposed to ask? She says, it's not her job to tell you, and you need to figure it out for yourself. So this is something I hear, those who espouse the idea of manifestation, you can create your own reality. I've tried this myself. I've tried focusing my will and my intent on something that I want to bring into my life. And I've really, really tried hard, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for me. And people say, oh, you're not asking in the right way.
Mm.
Well, either it works or it doesn't, you know?
Yep.
But
Mm-hmm.
apparently you've got to ask in the right way. So, number two, you're gasping for a coffee. You go into the shop and you ask for one. The server refuses. You ask why. She says you wanted it too much. This is another thing. If you really, really want it and you just fixate on it every day and you think, oh, I really, really want to bring this into my life, you can want it too much. And if you want it too much, it doesn't happen. It goes away. We're told you have to ask for it once, put it out there, and then wait. And it might take a month. It might take 30 years. You just have to trust the process. Number three, you ask for a coffee. The server gives you a tea. You say, I wanted a coffee. The server says she knows, but sometimes you get the opposite of what you want. You ask what kind of sense that makes. She says it's not her job to tell you, and you have to figure it out for yourself. So, how many times have people really, really wanted something and they've asked for it to come into their lives and they've got the exact opposite of what they wanted? So, what's the point then? Number four, you ask for a coffee. The server takes your money. You're waiting for effing ages. I don't know if we swear on this, but no coffee turns up. You ask when it's coming. The server wags a finger and says, you have to be patient and you'll get the coffee when it's good and ready and not a moment before. That's something else we're told. Number five, you ask for a coffee. The server spills it on you. You get mad. The server gets all righteous and says it's not her fault for spilling it. It's your fault for getting angry. She spilt it to teach you a lesson. You ask what the lesson is. She says it's not her job to tell you and you have to figure it out for yourself. Number six, someone next to you orders a coffee and gets exactly what they wanted straight away. You ask how that's fair. She says it's not her job to tell you and you have to figure it out for yourself. And number seven, 1 million people all order a coffee. Not one coffee arrives. You all call for the server to explain herself. The server is nowhere to be seen. And that last analogy can be equated to the past 4 years. Can you imagine how many prayers in all these different religious systems around the world have been offered up to whatever God these people believe in? And they would have been asking for normality to return to society, for this dreadful virus to go away if people actually believed that it was real, for balance and calm to return to society, and for evil to be eradicated. How many people ask for these things? How many people undergoing personal hardship? They might have someone in the family that's really ill, or they're going through some financial problems or whatever, and they'll be reaching out to their God or whatever entity they believe in and saying, please, God, I've tried to be faithful. I've tried to serve you all my life, but please save my family and eradicate this terrible disease and bring us some calm and some reassurance in our family. And how often do you actually get that? So where have all these prayers been going, and why do they never result in the things that you ask for? Think about prayer groups in church. So there'll be a list when people go to a church congregation of people in the community that are ill or dying, and the congregation will be asked to pray for them. What happens? They die anyway. So what was the point of the prayer then? So again, these are just questions that people tend not to ask. And going back to your earlier query about why it is that people don't think about these things, it's probably because these are very uncomfortable questions. It's quite disturbing to have to think about these things, and not many people want to go there. And I think you have to undergo a certain amount of turmoil and personal suffering and stress and trauma in your own life to get you to a point where you start asking these questions. And 2024, it's been all about that for me.
Well, most certainly, particularly the past 4 years, I really don't want to say it out loud, but I'm really starting to think that there's two types of people. There really is two types of people. And It's not enough just to say, oh, they're the good people and the bad people. That's because good people make bad choices as well. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about, we've already mentioned psychopaths and sociopaths. How about these sycophants who, insert themselves within a certain group of people to advance themselves at the expense of other people. Good people trying to do the right thing in life don't do things like that. And I've seen time after time after time, particularly over the past 4 years, so many examples of that. And I don't want it to be true, but I think there are two types of people. You were just talking about people that try to do the right thing, whether it's towards their fellow human or to nature or to animals or whatever it might be. I came across a video of Prince, and I know you talk about Prince when you do your presentations, but it kind of got me thinking, not only in regards to a lot of videos going around as to Prince being a kind of whistleblower, if you like. It got me thinking about the good people that are whistleblowers, particularly in the music industry, or if they're celebrities. And through your presentations, there's been a couple of people that you talk about who might have been retired. So they're presented to us as if, they died, but some of them my conspiracy allegedly, they have been retired and let go and able to live their own life. Or some of them have been 86th. So, they've been made unalive because they're not towing the line that they are a whistleblower, those sorts of things. I've just got a short video of Prince here, as I mentioned. It's from November 1999 on MTV, and he's talking about we're either here to be enlightened to enlighten or to discourage. So I just want to play this for people, and then I want to ask your thoughts about this.
Or what you're putting, do you think that other people do?
No, I don't.
You talk about music that's going out there right now. Are you talking about any particular type of music that you don't think is such a positive influence?
Well, it's very obvious when you hear words and lyrics, whether they enlighten or discourage.
Okay, so hip-hop gets slammed a lot. Marilyn Manson gets slammed, Korn gets slammed. A lot of those acts that are, out there putting, is that what we're talking about?
It's not what I'm talking about.
No?
I'm just talking about the truth.
Just general?
Yeah. The truth is that you either are here to enlighten or discourage.
Do you feel like...
So he says there you're either here to enlighten or to discourage. And so that, when I heard that, made me think of this, these thoughts that I've been having, that there's two types of people. That some people are innately kind, loving, and I don't know if, good people are here to enlighten, but there's definitely, a group of people that are kind, loving, and compassionate, and there's a group of people that aren't. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Do you think there's two groups of people? These people that are, part of the death cult out to do awful, nefarious things to people, and then there's another group of people that are innately good?
Yeah, I was just watching his hands in that video because
I know.
Couldn't keep his hands still, and there's like symbols forming, and then
you obviously, you've grown a lot.
Almost like he's instinctive.
Sorry, I'm just going to put it on mute and put it back up, because I think I don't know, this is my brain going nuts, but it kind of looks like he's trying to alert people to those hand symbols without actually or maybe he's making a mockery of it, or...
Well, my theory is that so many of these artists are mind controlled into doing that. They're just programmed to do it. I was watching a performance of Kim Wilde, who I used to love in the 80s. she's still going. She's still doing concerts now. And she just kept flashing up the 666 sign through the concert. And I don't think that she was consciously aware that she was doing it. It's because she's just been entrained in that through her career. And I think that's why many of these artists flash up these hand signs that we all now recognize, because they've just been programmed into doing it. But yeah, this is a good segue into what I did want to get onto, to try and put a positive slant on things. So you've touched on it there. Something has to account for the fact that most of us know the difference between right and wrong. Instinctively, we know how we should be living and how we shouldn't be living. And it can all be summed up in a very simple phrase: do not treat others in a way you would not wish to be treated yourself, or simplified even further, to do no harm. That's the golden rule. Most of us know that you shouldn't murder people, you shouldn't rape people, you shouldn't physically assault people, you shouldn't steal from people, you shouldn't defraud people, you shouldn't lie to people. We know we shouldn't be doing it. Some of us do some of these lesser things. We've all lied, but I think we get this uncomfortable feeling when we have, that we shouldn't have done it, because we know in ourselves that it was wrong. Something has to account for the fact that we have consciences. Obviously, there are psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists in society. You're always going to get that. But they do comprise a minority of the population. So most people know the difference between right and wrong. So where does that come from? That indicates to me that we are at our very core divine sparks, and we do come from somewhere else. So we're not products of this Yaldabaoth, Rex Mundi, Demiurge, Satan, whatever you want to call it, the Yahweh of the Old Testament. That will horrify Christians as well. But I think the Old Testament in the Bible is not the story of how the God of all creation made this world, but it's the story of how this Demiurge, this abomination, created this hell realm. That's what we're reading about there. But we ultimately come from somewhere else. And that's why the likes of us, you, with all the great work you're doing, because you're brilliant, and so many other researchers and activists and people that are doing the same sort of work as us, what motivates us then? Because if we were products of this hellish abomination entity that's all about fear and trauma and stuff, if we come from that, how come we want to do the right thing? How come we don't want to live in that kind of world? How come we aspire towards something better? Because we can see better systems of living. And that's what we're trying to steer humanity and society towards. That's coming from somewhere. And that's our true nature. And that's why I think we were, in some way, tricked or forced or coerced into this world. This is not our home. That's why so many of us struggle here. We realize that we don't belong here. I've known it since early childhood. I can remember being 4 years old and looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, this is wrong. I shouldn't be here. So I think I've known it all my life. And I'm sure many people watching this can relate to that. We know this is not our home. We know we come from somewhere better. And I think if we can do the right thing in this life, and if we give it our very best shot and we do what we know to be right, we might reap a lot of crap and a lot of personal suffering in these lives as a result. But ultimately, when we leave, when we exit this reality, when we leave these bodies, maybe we are earning ourselves our pass out of here so that we never have to come back. Because I've personally got no interest in ever coming back to this place in any form whatsoever. It'll be a one-way ticket, no return required. And maybe we are earning that one-way ticket out of here by doing the right thing. So I'm not trying to discourage people from doing what they know to be right. I'm not trying to say that if you try and live a positive, inspirational life, you're just going to reap a whole load of crap. So therefore, don't do it. Therefore, just become a selfish normie and do whatever you want and to hell with everybody else. My message is the opposite. No, carry on doing what you know to be right. Yes, you might reap some suffering as a result because this realm seems to be set up in that way. But ultimately, I think it's going to work out okay for the likes of us. And I've actually developed a lot of compassion, even more compassion, I would say, since asking these questions, since January, People might think, oh, these are, Mark's in a terrible place right now. And I've heard those comments, oh, Mark's in a really dark place, from Christians mainly. Mark Devlin's in a really dark place. I'm going to cut myself off from him. Not, I'm going to extend a hand of friendship to my brother and see if I can lift him up somehow. It's no, I'm having nothing to do with him. Oh, no, he's in a terrible place right now. But actually, I found that this has made me more compassionate and more empathetic towards others and even living things. I'll be out walking and I'll see ants on the ground, insects, and I'll deliberately avoid walking on them. I'll walk around the ants because I don't want to cause them any harm. I don't want to cause any living thing any harm if I can help it. Because the way I see it, we're all trapped here. Whether you're an ant or a cow or a goat or a bird or a human, we're all forms of life. We're all living sentient beings, and we're all to some degree or another suffering. So we're co-slaves. So we shouldn't exploit each other and harm each other. We should respect each other. And that goes for all living things, not just humans. So if anything, I think this worldview has made me a better person. And I've not sunken into this dark place of, no hope and despair.
No,
it's had the opposite effect, I think.
I mean, what's to say that when people question our very existence and purpose and all those sorts of things, and then when it disagrees with those religious systems, who's to say that's not a psyop to segregate and push away those people and say, oh, can't talk to them anymore and all those sorts of things? Because if people did talk to you or anybody else that's asking the same sort of questions or about a different topic as well, then that person that's asking you opens themselves up to thinking about something that extends them. So who's to say that that's not one big sort of social engineering sort of thought that infiltrates people's minds, is to keep people away from people like you that are questioning stuff. We can't have you infecting people with a brain virus to actually help them think and discover things about themselves and the world and humanity and all of those. Can't have that.
Well, a few people have said to me since I started this series, what are you doing? This is a really bad idea. Just stick to the music stuff. You're great at exposing the music industry. Just stick to doing that. You're not qualified to talk about spirituality and theology and stuff. Why not? So I've had a few comments like that. But for the most part, I've had very supportive comments, apart from the triggered Christians. I've had a lot of people saying to me, wow, you are expressing exactly what has been on my mind for a very long time. And you're articulating that. And that's something I got through the Convid debacle. When I was ranting and raving about what was going on, people were saying, oh, you're putting into words exactly how I feel. Thank you for that. And now I'm getting it with this stuff. People are saying, yeah, I've felt this way for years and I've never known how to express it. And you're putting it out in your videos. This is great. So I am actually getting a lot of support. And a lot of people do seem to have arrived at this way of thinking. And like I say, I think all roads lead here. If you're on a truth-seeking journey, you can study all these other different subjects and stuff. But ultimately, you're going to end up at this point asking these questions. What are we? What are we doing here? What created this? And how do we get out of it? I'm still working on the how to get out of it.
No, I think I've lost count how many times, particularly during the mandates, when people, because I spent most of my time on the streets every day, whether it was Parliament House or
you did, yeah.
And I lost count the amount of times we'd just look at each other and go, is this real? Like, is this actually happening? And then that starts conversations with one person, and then there's another person next to you, and then you end up having a much larger conversation with many more people, and it not only did we build wonderful friendships, but also it is thought-provoking situations, conversations, friendships that actually helped us a lot, because so many people were despairing during that time, whether you had you lost your house, you lost your family, you lost your job. There's so much despair and suffering. Again, there's that word. And so just that one question, is that real? And leading on from there, it did bring a lot of comfort and solace. And just to even talk, we didn't have any answers, but just to be able to talk about it, people don't think you're nuts, and to have those conversations,
Yeah.
wonderful.
The first record I ever bought was a pretty cool one. It was Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, which is an amazing song. And I still get tingles up my spine every time I hear it. And I've still got the original 7-inch vinyl somewhere tucked away in my garage. And if you think of the opening lines to that song, I got drawn to that song when I was 5 years old because it was #1 in the charts for 9 weeks. And every Thursday on Top of the Pops, they used to show the video. And the video, I thought at the time, was very creepy and it's a bit scary, but something about it just drew me in. And think about the opening lines to that song. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
Wow.
So in the opening lines to that song there, we've just summed up what we've been talking about in this show, basically.
We
And
should
that
have just
song,
put the song on.
well, yeah, that song is about the Faustian bargain. That's what it's actually addressing. It's Freddie having sold his soul to the devil and he wants it back. And when you get to the operatic section, it's a battle between the forces of good, angels, and the forces of evil, demons, and they're battling for Freddie's soul. And in the end, Freddie gets his soul back. But that's what that whole song is all about. Yeah, that was the first record I was ever drawn to as a kid. And then I ended up doing this kind of work. But just right there in the opening lines, is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? How can anyone not ask those questions during the course of a human lifetime?
Yep. Mark, it's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you again, particularly about what we've just spoken about. As I've already mentioned, all of your links are in the description. Just quickly for everyone, you started a new Patreon channel. Do you call it a channel? Patreon account? Page?
Channel.
For people. Yeah, channel. Can you tell people about that? Because that's a little bit different.
Yeah, so I started the Patreon in, I think it was January. And so for the past 15 years or so, I've been putting out all my content for free online. So it's hours and hours and hours. It probably equates to several weeks worth of videos if you watched them back to back. And I just reached the point where I thought, well, I've got operating costs the same as anyone else. And a lot of other researchers and broadcasters I know run a Patreon. And this is an opportunity for people to support my work if they choose to. Nobody's being forced to. It's entirely voluntary. But if people have found value in my work and would like to donate whatever they can, a very small amount, to help it continue, that's what a Patreon is all about. And it's an opportunity for me to post exclusive content that only goes on that channel. So I don't post it elsewhere. So I offer 3 videos a month to my supporters. And it's just that. It's a way of getting more of my content and just helping me to continue to operate because, we all face the same costs in life and I don't have a full-time job. This is all I do. And so that's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. I just saw, it wasn't too long ago, you put up a video about Michael Jackson. I thought, that looks intriguing.
I did want to mention something when you were talking about Prince there. If we just assume for a moment, let's take the Wikipedia approved official version of everything. Okay, I know there's conspiracies about, did Michael Jackson really die? Did Prince really die? But if we just take the official record about these artists having died when we're told they did. So just think about those who have spoken out in some way or other. They've criticized the workings of the music industry. They've had a thing or two to say about organized society and how that works and how it enslaves people. So George Michael spoke out. We're told he died of heart failure in bed on Christmas Day. Michael Jackson spoke out. We're told that he died of a fentanyl overdose administered by his doctor. Prince spoke out. We're told he collapsed in an elevator aged 57, like you do. Chris Cornell spoke out about terrible things
Yes.
that go on in the industry. We're told he decided to end his own life. Chester Bennington, same way, ended the same way. I mean, how many others are there?
Yeah, the list goes on and on.
Whitney Houston didn't necessarily speak out about stuff, but put a lot of great songs out about love into the world. Ends up dead in a bathtub, you know. John Lennon was obviously a part of the Beatles, and I think the Beatles were pushing agendas during the 60s, but I feel that John Lennon developed a conscience, became something of a genuine activist in the 70s, and through his solo material tried to put out empowering material, gets assassinated. Bob Marley put out some great songs, really inspirational music, just happens to die of cancer, you know. So all these artists that speak out and try and help and uplift others end up in bad ways. And then you think of people like Sir Paul McCartney, Sir Mick Jagger, Sir Elton John. Is there a pattern emerging here?
I don't know. I think you might have a tinfoil hat floating around there somewhere, Mark.
Well, yeah, probably. Decade after decade, they just faithfully serve the agenda and push certain themes in their songs and stuff, and they're just fine. They're in their 70s and 80s. They're doing just fine. So there's a message somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Speak out, meet an unfortunate end, toe the line, and do the bidding of the demonic controllers. Have a nice life. And again, I'm not trying to discourage people from doing the right thing. I'm trying to encourage people to do what they know to be right, because I think the rewards lie elsewhere. But it's just an observation I wanted to make.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd tend to agree with you there, Mark. So, as I said, I want to just let everybody know everything's in the description. Thank you so much for joining me again, Mark. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you can come out to Australia again. Who knows what's going to happen with all the madness? You never know what's going on from week to week around the world. But yeah, we hope to have you out in Australia again sometime.
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, I'd love that.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks for all your comments. And thank you again, Mark.
No worries. Cheers, Robyn. You're doing great work there, and keep that up. I know you will.
Oh, thank you. See you, everyone.